Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got my buddy Carter Karels on from Gig'em 247. How you doing, bud?
Doing great, man. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being flexible a little bit and doing this. I know it's crazy right now with the season. Stepping back from the season just a little bit, losing the first game of the year in the first game of a new coaching regime, and then never losing again, right? I guess LSU is kind of doing the same thing. Lost week 1 to USC, and then hasn't lost again since then, which creates a pretty fun matchup this week. But stepping back from the season before we talk the LSU game much, this start under Elko is pretty impressive, huh?
Very impressive. I mean, 6-1 through your first 7 games, going into a matchup like this weekend. Uh, couldn't have asked for a better start, really, if you're a Texas A&M fan. And it really speaks to kind of the work that Mike Elko did in the offseason. You know, it wasn't quite a turnkey operation. There was some good talent that he inherited, but he had to do a lot of work in the transfer portal, getting 23 scholarship guys. About half of them are starters for this team. And then just bouncing back from losing your starting quarterback for 3 games and having to go to your backup, Marcel Reed, and how they handled that situation. I mean, they really couldn't have handled it better. So they've been ugly at times this year. They beat Bowling Green by a score. They barely skated past Arkansas. But you got to give this coaching staff a lot of credit for figuring out how to win these close games when they didn't have their starting quarterback and really having about as good of a start as you could have hoped for.
Yeah, they've found ways to win games, which is super impressive. And they're not too dissimilar to me from LSU. Like LSU hasn't looked just amazing at times. I mean, they certainly played well last week against Arkansas, and they've at times looked really good. But they had to scrape out a win that I think Ole Miss kind of blew. Their loss against USC kind of looks worse and worse by the week, although they're a different team maybe than they were in week 1. Thoughts on you did mention the not having the quarterback at times. Thoughts on the way that Wigman has bounced back from injury, and I mean he's one of the better. I don't think SEC play in the quarterback play in the SEC has been great this year by any means, but I mean honestly he and Nussmeier are two of the better QBs that we've seen this year.
Connor Wigman, sorry, you broke up just a second there.
No, I was, thoughts on big picture, how Wigman has bounced back. He and Nussmeier, two of the better quarterbacks, I think, in the SEC this year.
Yeah, the thing about Wigman, there are going to be times where you say, wow, this is the reason why people thought he was going to be potentially a first-round pick. He'll make some beautiful throws, tight windows, back shoulder throws. Then there's other times, though, where kind of struggles and you don't really know what he's seeing and he makes some bad decisions. And I think that's the biggest thing with him is it's been a little bit up and down. A&M honestly has relied a lot more on Le'Veon Moss through these first 7 games. But yeah, Wigman, when he's playing well, this team's kind of unbeatable. Like when you look at that Missouri game and what they were able to do against that team, there are not a lot of teams that would have beaten Texas A&M that day. And so when he's on, this team's on, and that'll be the key moving forward. You know what you're going to get out of Le'Veon Moss. You know what you're going to get out of this defense, particularly the defensive line led by Nick Scorton. But it's kind of the question, and I think he kind of is who he is at this point. It's year 3. He's going to be up and down, but I think you just got to hope that, hey, if your running game's there, if your defense is there, he just needs to do kind of enough to, win these games. And I think he has. It's just, you saw it at the Mississippi State game. You saw it in the Notre Dame game. Sometimes it can get really ugly, and that's what you kind of have to avoid with him.
On the other side of the ball, we talked about Nussmeier being pretty good. Their weapons are really good. How effective do you think A&M's defense will be at trying to slow LSU down this week?
Yeah, I tend to think that this game, LSU is going to score points, A&M is going to score points. These defenses, like for A&M, they got a great defense, but they gave up 24 against Mississippi State, they gave up 20 against Bowling Green. They'll probably be around in the 20s, but I think the key is maybe to make this kind of a one-dimensional LSU offense. They've been very pass-heavy for a lot of the season, but over the last few weeks, they've started to run the ball a lot more effectively with Caden Durham. So I think if A&M can shut down one aspect, it's the run, and then if you're making them kind of one dimensional, you could really activate your pass rush. And something that A&M's done really well this season is starting games hot. They've scored on their first drive in all but one game so far. They've come out swinging in a lot of games, and they're really built to protect leads. They got a great running back in Le'Veon Moss, and they've got a great pass rush and defensive line. So you can have that lead, you can really protect it, especially when the opposing offense is one dimensional. LSU's got a lot of explosive options. You obviously Kyron Lacey being the big one. I think Mason Taylor could have a big game. The tight end for LSU. Kind of the question mark for A&M's defense is the nickel position. They had a really great starter there in Tyreek Chappelle, who suffered a season-ending injury a couple games into the year. They initially replaced him with a Florida transfer. You may know him, Jaden Hill. He really struggled, and it kind of prompted another move. They brought a cornerback to nickel, and B.J. Mays is a UAB transfer, and he's played better there, and they've given him more stats. He's never played nickel before, so it's kind of an adjustment, but he played about 60 snaps against Mississippi State. They're trying to get him more involved as he's kind of learning the position. And so maybe it's not as much of a weakness as it used to be when Jaden Hill was taking all those snaps, but it's kind of the spot to watch for this defense if there's one weakness. But outside of that, this defense, they had their run defense struggles early in the year. They've been really good against it over the last few, handful of games. And then, against the pass, it's been a very active defense. They've got 8 picks on the year. You got Will Lee, who's got 8 pass breakups, the Kansas State transfer. So they've been sticking in coverage. They've been good against the run. They've, obviously got a great pass rush. So in almost every way, they have their times where they give up explosive plays. The first drive against Mississippi State was pretty bad. There are times where they look human, but for most of the game, they're going to look pretty dang good.
Their defensive line certainly kind of anchored that unit and been really good this year. Although, I do think that a matchup to watch is them against LSU's O-line. I looked through the schedule real quick, and I think LSU's offensive line is probably the best they will have seen up to this point. So if LSU is able to neutralize that, does it kind of give – I don't think they can stop A&M's D-line. But if they can kind of neutralize that or win more often than A&M has seen against them, is that maybe a concern for you?
Yeah, it's definitely the strength-on-strength matchup in this game. I think Mike Elko said that whoever wins that matchup, I think he said it was like a $10 million matchup in terms of what it could do for their draft stock. But I would argue, too, this is the best D-line that LSU has faced. So really, I don't know what to kind of expect there. I think that some numbers are misleading, like Garrett Musnire has only been sacked twice this year. But there have been games like against South Carolina where, he has been on the run. He has been pressured. He just has been really good about avoiding sacks. So the key for this defense may not be getting pressure. It might be just finishing plays. And, you've seen it at times. Shamar Stewart is a guy who flashes a lot, gets a lot of pressure, but he really struggles to finish plays and make sacks. So is he somebody who, is right there but can't make the play this weekend would be kind of my concern. I think Nick Scorton is playing his best football right now over the last few games, not just in the pass rushing game, but against the run, what that kid does. I mean, he's a projected top 10 pick for a reason. And so I would expect that there are going to be some plays where Scorton and Stewart are held in check, but I would also expect with an Elko coach defense where the emphasis on third downs in particular is to, you crowd the line of scrimmage, you don't know who's blitzing, you don't know, you got the coverages disguised. It can be confusing for an opposing offense. So LSU is going to have to be, it's going to be a big challenge for, you're on the road. You may not be able to hear yourself. You've got to make checks at the line of scrimmage and slide your protections and know where all the blitzes are coming from. Uh, they could be doing their job, but they're just not in the right spot, So I think it'll be a mixed bag of both. It's the matchup I'm most looking forward to for A&M, but if there was a matchup that could maybe be the most challenging, uh, that would be among them for A&M, just because of what Will Campbell and Emory Jones have, been able to do as two projected first round picks.
Um, People always talk about looking ahead, and I don't necessarily expect the team or the staff to do this, but I don't have to play this weekend. But if they were able to win this game, they start to have a pretty realistic path to almost have a play-in game, right? With Texas at the end of the year, South Carolina coming up. There are other games on the schedule, and so you can't take anybody for granted. But a win starts to set up really, really nice for A&M, starting to make some postseason noise. Again, the team's not talking about that. The staff's not talking about that, I'm sure. But this game is massive, really, for both teams in picking up their second loss or having kind of a play your way in type situation down here in November.
Yeah, A&M and LSU have had some pretty big games, but not really like this. I mean, you could argue 2012, both teams had one loss and were contending for the SEC West with Johnny Manziel's Heisman year. But this game is arguably bigger. This is probably the biggest game in Kyle Field since that 2013 Bama game in terms of just stakes and how many people are going to tune in and what the crowd's going to look like. And yeah, you look ahead, and I mean, A&M was really gifted probably the most favorable schedule they'll have in decades. I mean, think about it. There are 8 ranked teams in the SEC outside of A&M right now. A&M does not have to play 5 of them. They only play 3 ranked SEC teams this year. Their 4 hardest games are all at home: Notre Dame, Missouri, Texas, and LSU. And then your 3 true road games: Auburn, South Carolina, and Mississippi State. That's pretty easy. That's about as easy as a draw you're going to find as part of the SEC. And you look at the rest of the schedule. You also have a bye week in there, a second bye week, November 9th, coming out of that South Carolina game, and it just sets up perfectly. If you're talking about even, there's thought that if you're an SEC team, you can make it at 10-2, and you got to think at the end of the year, even if A&M loses to Texas, hey, they've got wins over LSU and Missouri, and you could look and say, hey, this team deserves a spot if that Texas game is competitive. And even if they lose to Texas, they could still make the SEC championship game as a one-loss SEC team, in conference play. So it's kind of crazy to think about what could happen if they win this game. Even if they lose this game, if they run the table, they could make the SEC championship game in the playoffs. So yeah, they're set up very well. And if they win this game, right now they're ranked 14th. People are starting to talk about them, but if they win this game, they're going to be the only undefeated team in the SEC in conference play. I mean, this is a battle between the only 2 undefeated SEC teams remaining in conference play. So you win this game, and now everybody's going to be talking about you.
Yeah. Do you have a prediction in this one as we get the game of the weekend set to go here in just a little over 24 hours?
I got 27-26 A&M, a very, very close one. Am I confident about it? No, but I think that X factor really is what version of Wigman are you getting? Is it good Wigman? Is it bad Wigman? Hard to predict. It's his highs, his lows are very different, and I just think being in a home environment is going to give A&M a huge advantage. That Kyle Field, is it Death Valley? I don't know. That's up for debate. But is it one of the better 10 best venues in college football? Absolutely. And so I think there will be a big impact from that standpoint. And I think Wigman, for as up and down as he's been in his career, he hasn't put together 2 or 3 bad games in a row. It's usually just one bad game, good game, bad game, good game. So I think he bounces back. And I do think this LSU defense is susceptible. Yes, they've defended the run well at times, But they also gave up about 250 rushing at South Carolina. And really, their secondary has not been all that impressive this year. Teams have been able to throw on them, and I think their safety play is a little weak. So I think A&M can score, put up points on offense, and I think their defense will be good enough to make LSU one-dimensional.
Cool. Carter, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Gig'em247.com is where you can find my work, and then at Carter Karels on Twitter.
Awesome, man. Good luck this weekend. I appreciate you, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks, TJ.